Welcome to the podcast, Tiffany Harris.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So as a brief intro, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about who you are, what your interests are, and a little bit about how we got here?
So I'm Tiffany Harris. I'm a senior at the University of Michigan. I met Ryan this summer actually through Maximize, and that was really cool and really just offered his help for Creatives of Color, which is an organization I'm president of. Basically, we're an organization that really wants to give people of color a space to perform, collaborate, and really come together and really make something beautiful. Whether you're an artist for 5 years, 1 year, or just became an artist, you have the space to perform and collaborate and find other people on campus like yourself. So I think that's what's really unique about my organization. So that's how we met, but I'm also really interested in politics. My major is political science and African American studies. I also am involved with quite a few other orgs on campus, support for incoming Black students, the Black Undergraduate Law Association, as well as my dance company, which is really, I've been dancing for basically my whole life, and really makes me happy and at home and at peace. I'm also really interested in yoga, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I really want to work, to try to get equality for everyone in the future. I hope to become a civil rights lawyer, but that's just a short intro of some of my interests.
Just a wonderful introduction. Tiffany, you're one of the people who inspires me most in my life today, just with all of the leadership positions that you have and the missions that you're working towards with, bringing more equality to Capitol Hill and, the Black Excellence Project and Creatives of Color and the events that you've thrown, and also taking time to dance and practice yoga and all of these things. It's really wonderful to see and very inspiring to me. Um, so we're going to dive into a lot of topics today, including, this upcoming election. The election is actually today. Today is November 3rd, 2020. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that, the state of the world, also Black Lives Matter, and education reform, and then also hopefully a little bit of health and wellness at the end, just to sort of ease the stress of some of these more heavy topics. So let's really dive into it. And I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit more about both Creatives of Color and what you've been able to accomplish with that organization this year, as well as the Black Excellence Project.
So for Creatives of Color, it's really hard to maintain a performance-based org right now with COVID, but somehow we made it work. So for example, one of our last events that Ryan actually went to was a creative expo event. And so we gave performers a chance to perform in an e-board member's basement, and he transformed his basement into like a performance space. And so that was really cool. And we live streamed it over Twitch. And so I got to perform. It was a very small space, but I made it work. And there were probably about 10 artists who performed, rappers, singers, dancers, people who made movies, who are really into film. So I think it just really, like, despite the pandemic, we made it happen. Usually we have really big events like 200 plus people and then probably like 20 performers. So it obviously looked very different. We couldn't have the audience like we did before, but it was still nice to be around my executive board and also give people a space to perform and also view it from home and feel safe.
I want to talk more about that because the Creative Expo was the sort of signature event that was in preparation for several months, and we talked a lot about how to actually execute that project. And so I think being able to pull it off in the way that you did and having so many creatives, Black creatives, come into a space safely and be able to perform in their various expertise was a true testament to the resilience of your organization. So could you tell me a little bit more about, I guess, the leadership within your organization and also the creatives within your organization that allow events like this, where we're mostly virtual, to actually happen?
So basically, like, Creators of Color, we are a performance-based organ, so it's really hard to kind of maintain sometimes, but we really make it work because we have so many members. We have over 200 members in general, and so we have a lot of people who are interested in so many different art forms. We have written workshops, and then usually for our creative showcase that we usually have at the end of the year, um, usually we pair people up that don't know each other. So it's people that are filmmakers, artists, dancers. If you're into yoga, whatever your art form is, you're going to collaborate with someone who has a different art form than you and create something great. And you only have like a few weeks to do it. So it's kind of just very sporadic. I made up the dance that we were doing kind of a last minute too. So it's very much like improv and kind of freedom to really make up your own. And I think that's what's really beautiful about Creatives of Color, because I know in my life, I primarily was taught by white ballet, very strict technical work. And so I never really had the freedom to express my own dance style. It was always very like, you have to follow what we're giving you. And so I think Creatives of Color just gives people a chance to, show their own style of art and really showcase it in whatever way they want to, whether they have been performing for a few days, a month, their whole lives. They really have a chance to really perform whatever they want to. And we don't restrict people. So I think that's what's great.
I think that's what's really great about just creativity in general is that it's so free flowing and expressive. And I think creativity has a really important role to play, especially today with all of the stressors going on and, obviously the election today and the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and also things like climate change. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the role that creativity has to play in sort of alleviating these stressors in your life.
Yeah. So I grew up. So my grandmother is a really big influence on my life. She passed away about a year ago, and so she was really into yoga, sound meditation, dancing, and kind of the reason why I really eat healthy. I really influence a lot of other people to eat the way I do, and also to create and kind of just improv and let your body guide you. So I think yoga is just really helpful for me because I deal with a lot of stress and a lot of responsibilities, and yoga and dance is kind of a way that I just don't think about it. So when I'm listening to music, I'll be choreographing in my head. If I'm doing yoga outside, I'll be doing it with other people and meditating and really like coming together with people, because I think a lot of people don't realize the effects of dancing and yoga and just like exercising and really taking care of yourself. And I think that's what's really beautiful about it. So definitely a great stress reliever, really healthy for people in general. If you know, want to stop being like stressed out all the time, it's definitely a good way to meditate and just um, give yourself a chance to relax, honestly.
Yeah, and we've had a chance to practice yoga socially distanced before in person. We the first time we met in person, we were able to go out behind the track and practice yoga socially distanced. And I learned a thing or two from you about how to actually properly stretch and start to increase my flexibility. And then I was able to lead a flow, and because I'm a practicing yoga instructor, and so it's been quite a journey of finding these creative outlets of self-expression, health and wellness, body movement in order to actually like deal with some of these challenging things that we have going on in our lives today. Um, I
Yeah,
want to
definitely.
I wanted to shift to the Black Excellence Project
Yeah.
because I know this is something that's very near and dear to your heart and is sort of that North Star, it seems, in my mind, of many of the things that you want to accomplish in your career. So, could
Yeah.
you maybe tell us more about the Black Excellence Project and the goals of the organization?
Yeah, so basically, how I founded this organization is because I worked for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation this summer. I was an intern. I was just coming back from South Africa, and I was looking for an internship, and I applied, and it was virtual, and so I was obviously disappointed that I couldn't be in DC. I couldn't actually meet politicians and other policymakers. just because being virtual in an internship really isn't the full experience, but I still got to meet a ton of interns. I was in a cohort of 55 people, and I met with a bunch of congressmen and women every day, and that was really interesting and cool. But one thing that stood out to me was the fact that they told us out of 800 people that applied, 55 people got the internship, which is good. I'm glad a lot of people did, but that's not enough. That's not showing like the actual ratio of educated Black students who deserve the internship. And so I think it was just a lack of people not knowing that the internship existed. So for example, like the only reason that I applied for the internship was because I had a friend who did it the summer before. And so what the Black Excellence Project does is basically we want to create like Black career fairs, which would give Black students on campus a space to feel like comfortable in a workspace. A lot of times, Black people and other people of color will feel like the token person of color in the office, you know, not really wanted, really, but just wanted for the fact that it fills that diversity quota. And so, what the Black Excellence Project is doing is really giving people a space to find internships, have resumes done, getting resources on Capitol Hill with, so I met with a recruiter, Brent Sullivan, and he basically said, like, if you make this nonprofit, I'll provide the resumes, cover letters, all the resources that you need, because he's a recruiter. And so he would, you know, get Black students like me who really want to work in a Black space for the Congressional Black Caucus, or who are trying to get to Capitol Hill, and give them those resources to do so. Because a lot of Black students and a lot of people in general just get discouraged from DC. They're like, oh, it's too expensive. You know, there's not many Black people who work there. And there is. It's just that at least our predominantly white institutions don't show that. They don't, like, I've never really been to a Black career fair. I think the only organization who maybe has one is like the National Black Society of Engineers. But in politics, it's a very white dominated field, at least at Michigan. And so I really want in the future to just have like people of color that own businesses having career fairs and giving people of color another space that they feel comfortable working in.
I think the Black Excellence Project is a very important and necessary project. And we've had conversations in the past about these predominantly white spaces, and particularly, I mean, on campus, right? And on campuses throughout the US. Uh, Maybe you could tell us more about that experience, and coming from like a personal lens of entering these spaces and these environments that are predominantly dominated by people who look different than you. And I know it's more than just looks and color.
Yeah.
There are deeply rooted issues there, and we can talk about that. But this is something that we've spoken about before, and so I would love maybe for you to be able to share that perspective.
Yeah. And so I guess I'll give you a little background of like where I grew up, kind of who I am. So I grew up, I'm from Southfield, Michigan, and I went to Country Day, if you have ever heard of it. It's a very private, white, privileged high school. And so before that, before I went to Country Day for a large amount of my childhood, I also went to Brace Letterly. It was an all Black school. And so when I went there, you know, I was the person that was referred to as too light to be Black. And then I moved to Country Day, and they're like, oh my God, look at her hair, it's curly, and look at her skin tone, it's, you know, dark. And I had a student, I remember I was 9, I was in 4th grade, and a student said, oh, you know, I had my hand raised, and he said, you know, you can't answer the question, you're Black. You know, and that was like my first time like being like, wow, like racism is really taught, you know. And like my parents had been telling me that, and I didn't really think that people could be racist at such a young age, but you just realize that it's the parents' notion of them telling them like, oh, this Black person is not smart because they're Black, you know, they're unintelligent. It's just these like ideologies from slavery coming in now, and they still exist, obviously, as we know, and stereotypes about Black people being threatening, and unintelligent and unable to succeed in an institution like this. Um, and so I think that that shaped a lot of who I am, and to work really hard and to do as much as I can, and to get as high as GPA as possible and succeed as much as possible, just because everyone thinks that you can't. A lot of people think that Black people just don't deserve to succeed, can't succeed, all of these stereotypes that have been perpetuated throughout the media and just throughout from slavery to now. And so now that I'm in a predominantly white institution again, it's not really a surprise, but I also realize the ways in which like white supremacy affects everyone, not just like, white people or Black people or other people of color, but just like the fact that colorism exists, for example. So like some of my friends maybe won't be preferred because they're dark skinned, but then I'll be preferred because I'm light skinned, I'm mixed, I'm less Black, quote unquote. In the eyes of many people, people don't see me as Black. Some people say I talk white, but what does that really mean? If you say like, what does talking white mean? Like, do all Black people talk the same? No. And do all white people talk the same? No. So it's just, I think just the main thing is like a lot of white people haven't been around Black people before because of where they're from, and their communities are very segregated. And then they come to Michigan and they have all these stereotypes from the media, and they think that that's how all Black people are. But obviously that's not the case. So I just think it's a process of learning and unlearning and realizing that if you don't have Black friends, you should get one. If you don't have a person of color in your life, you should have people of color in your life. They give you different perspectives on how to live, on the way they see reality versus the way you see reality. Um, Obviously, they make you care about things. Like, I think a lot of people didn't care about Black Lives Matter as much as they did, but they saw me posting, and they saw me protesting in DC, and they saw me protesting in Florida, and they said, oh, Tiffany cares about this, maybe I should too. And so I think that people of color being in white people's lives has a lot of influence positively on just changing stereotypes. People think singularly about Black people or about mixed people or about other people of color, and you need to have other people of color in your life in order to change those stereotypes in order to move forward. So if we ever want to become a post-racial country, we really have to stop being segregated, and we have to work to come together and have these conversations that are difficult, and really just realize that we're all people. There's not some people who deserve to be put in prison, or there's not some people who deserve to be killed by police. There's just so many corrupt things in society, and the media will make you think that that is the right way that society should be, but it's not. So yeah, that's kind of my long spiel there. But basically, we just need to come together as people and realize that we're all human. We're all here for 70, 80 years, hopefully, and make a positive difference. Don't spread hate, don't teach hate, and really just come together with the people around you.
I think that last point too, it's not just about not doing things. And I think you'll agree with this. It's about doing the right things,
Mm-hmm.
because you can be silent and that still tells like what your core values are, right? So I think taking action, especially now, is incredibly important. But it's not only just taking action; it's having a broad enough perspective, and like actually listening and hearing the people with perspectives and backgrounds and histories different than you, and then taking action because you have that fundamental understanding of where someone else is coming from.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my core values is, before even I started Maximize, is 50-50 human relationships. And I take that with me into every single role that I have. I take that with me into every single relationship that I form. Anything concerning, or yeah, with other people, I always bring that 50-50. And I think I've started to become more colorblind. I'm not going to make a claim that I am colorblind because I'm not, but my I guess the stark differences in people's outward appearance has become less prevalent to me as I've started to have these conversations and dialogues with people. And I think Maximize has been a perpetuator of that for me. Um, One of the really interesting things that I recently talked about with someone was that in education, and particularly, I guess, in the business world, um, they teach, they're basically priming you for corporate America, right? Which is dominated by white people again, right? Mostly white men. And in my entrepreneurship education, they teach diversity. They teach that diversity for startup teams and diversity in thinking and ideas is really important for a startup to succeed. And while they teach it, they don't necessarily show how to do it properly,
Mhm.
how to reach out to these groups, how to like integrate and desegregate business, but it's taught to be an important value of startups. And so in my entrepreneurship education, I've actually had that opportunity. That said, I'm still struggling to find these groups and sort of like become connected with these groups. And I've had also people tell me, like, people of colors tell me it's not up to black people to end racism
Exactly.
because racism wasn't started by black people. It's up to the white people, right, to be the ones extending those arms and saying, hey, let's welcome each other into this new way of treating each other.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
just my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. And like a lot of people just think, oh, black people are getting killed by police. That's their problem. I'm like, but hold on, hold on. Let's look at the history of police. They started off as slave patrollers. That's their direct history. And so you're thinking like if they have these biases and back then and they are killing black people and taking them and doing all these things, and now it's basically transformed into the same thing of criminalizing and killing and putting in jail and prison black and brown people for profit. So that's what it's turned into today. And so a lot of people in most of our police force, I'm not sure the exact percentage, obviously, is white men. Even in Detroit, even where I'm from, like Southfield area, like all of the police force is white, even though they're not from Detroit, they're not from Southfield, but they're coming in from these suburbs and having these biases about black people, and then obviously they want to put them in jail and prison because they think they're on drugs or they stole something or they're threatening because of their race. So
It's just
definitely
terrible.
the work of white people to you know, um, really make new systems and abolish the systems in place right now, and try to abolish mass incarceration and all of these systems that I want to try to get rid of in my future as well.
Starts with the individual too. It starts with one person, and hopefully with one person, like a candle that's lit, you can light other fires. Or maybe that's not so timely given the California fires and like the crazy stuff, but with a candle, right, one candle, lit candle, can ignite, you know infinitely many other candles. It's the same ripple with people. If one person changes, they can create an infinite ripple that changes the entire culture of the humanity, really. um, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell one more quick story about uh, the admissions to Yale story that you told me about, because I think that is something that was completely blind to me as a white male, as a white person, just something I never had to deal with. You know what I'm
Do you
talking about?
like the law and advocacy um, thing I went to at Yale? I'm not sure.
I'm talking about your hair.
Wait. You said Yale? Yale
Was it
University?
Yale, or it was when you were doing like admissions interviews?
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, sorry. I was like, because I had two experiences at Yale. One, I actually went to Yale for a law program when I was a
Okay.
sophomore. So I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh, okay, I can tell you about Yale. So anyway, basically, before my Yale interview, I applied to 17 colleges, which is excessive. But my mom really wanted me to apply to all of them, and so I did. And so I applied to Yale, and I had braids in, and box braids on black girls obviously don't look professional in any white space. And so my mom, the day before my interview, made me take all of my braids out and wear a very slick bun, ballet bun, on my head, just because she thought that they wouldn't accept me if I, had my hair in an Afrocentric way. Because a lot of people don't view braids as professional. It's very much ghetto to a lot of people, and just not really accepted in the workforce in general. Just kind of like black girls and their culture and their sexuality and everything that we do is just not accepted in white spaces at all. Even if we're just, wearing normal clothes and we have hoops on, we're very much like over sexualized at a very young age. I remember when I was at Country Day, and they had a rule we couldn't wear makeup in middle school. And the dean would come up to me and touch my eyelashes. I didn't have any mascara on. I never wear mascara. A lot of people think I do. I never do. And had actually touched my eyelash, came up to me and said, you need to go clean your face and take that off. I was like, I have nothing on my face, and so a lot of people just think that black women are doing too much and we're too fast, and that goes back to slavery too. People don't realize that is that a lot of people, why do people think black women are over sexualized? Because of slavery, and because just the way that black women's bodies were viewed. Like I don't know if you've ever heard the story of like Sarah Hottentot. So I learned about her during my first semester at Michigan. She was a South African woman in her 20s, and she was kidnapped and taken to Europe, because of her body. The way her body looked was very exotic and unique looking to a lot of European people. She had, big breasts and butt and everything. And obviously that was not common in Europe. And so they put her on like a spectacle stage, and they would make money off of her just being on stage, and they would basically exploit her for money. And so she ended up passing away when she was in her 20s, probably around my age. And it was just crazy because like the government ended up keeping like her body parts and everything in Europe and not really giving it back to South Africa, even though basically the story of this is like black women's bodies were viewed as a commodity, as a spectacle, as a way to make money, and as a way, like, we were viewed as not human. Like our body types, our butts, our breasts, our everything that we had was seen as weird, as over sexualized, that we, are always wanting of sex and things like that, and that everything we do is just too much. We're always viewed like an access. And so I think, where my mom's coming from is like, she's like, oh, okay, well, if you wear the Afrocentric hair, you're not going to get into Yale because it's a white institution and you're being interviewed by a white man. So that's kind of like that history there of like us always being viewed as like not human, as deserving of sexual stuff and rape and all these things, because people never believed black women. Even in slavery, people didn't care about black women. I remember reading Ida B. Wells and Lynch Law and Southern Horrors, and how white men would rape black women and would never get in trouble for it, obviously. But if black women, or if black men ever even looked at a white woman, or even tried to flirt with her or anything, they'd be killed. Even regardless, like even if a white woman lied and said that black man raped me, he would still be killed. So it's just like whiteness gives people authority, regardless of how they look, if they have nice hair, if they have nice clothes, like their whiteness, the fact that they are white gives them the authority to control the truth, which is just interesting to think about. I'm writing an essay about that right now, so that's why I know so much about it. But yeah.
Can you do you mind sharing how the authority, right, the authority figure at Yale caused you to make changes to appear less Afrocentric?
So I mean, I didn't get into Yale, so I'm gonna be honest. I didn't end up getting in, but I wasn't gonna change my hair. It was kind of my mother's doing. She wouldn't let me go to the interview unless I changed my hair. And so I think that a lot of people just don't view braids and hoops and Black women in general as professional. Even when we have our natural hair out, we're still not viewed as professional. A lot of people will say, "Oh, Tiffany, I like your hair better straight. You know, you look whiter with it straight." And so I think that that just goes into preferring white ideals of beauty. We value straight hair, straight noses, small lips, small body types. We don't value Black women and their view of being in access. So if Black women have bigger hair, bigger bodies, we're viewed as threatening and loud, and people believe the stereotypes that they see in the media rather than realizing that we're just people with different body types. And so I think that a lot of my mom's motivation is kind of like is that's to me it's showing that white supremacy has influenced her so much in her life and in her growing up that she believes that whiteness is better. She believes that conforming to white ideals and having whiter hair types is better. And as a mixed person, you feel very much in the middle because you're half Black, half white, but that your family, at least my mom's side, very much prefers you to look whiter rather than getting darker. And so I've seen in my family that colorism has affected me so much. My mom, telling me to marry white, for instance, when I was growing up, to have even more mixed children so I don't ruin our genes, quote unquote. So I just think that white supremacy, colorism has affected not only, just Black people, but just it's separated us so much. So mixed people are now separated from Black people and, just really divided on those sorts of things, just because people think whiteness is closer to being pure and innocent and pretty, and Blackness is just and you realize anti-Blackness is really global. It's not just an American thing. I realized that in South Africa too, when they referred to me as colored, which means mixed race. So they've completely divided up Black people from colored people. Even though here Black mixed people and Black people are the same. I'm never gonna put really mixed race. If I'm asked, I'm gonna put Black. But in South Africa, it's completely different. Like the white race has completely separated the races so that it goes white people at the top, colored people in the middle, and Black people at the bottom always.
So I want to take this conversation back to the Black Excellence Project and Creatives of Color because you talked about both of these organizations as seeking to create safe environments for Black people, right? So can you tell us maybe more about why it's important for Black people to have these safe spaces and why all Black is necessary in some of these spaces?
Yeah, and so I think that really roots to us not having a space in general or a voice in general. A lot of spaces, for example, like we have our own parties, we have our own events and things like that. So, like we have our own frats and sororities, and a lot of places we don't feel accepted at white frats and Black. We feel much more accepted at people of color events and there's frats and sororities rather than going to a white frat where we maybe will feel uncomfortable. And so I think for creatives of color, because most of us, some of us may have grown up in a white environment like I have, and really haven't been given the space to create and perform and be around Black people. I remember being looked at in my ballet classes because I came in with braids one day, and the whole class was like looking at me like, oh my God, look at her hair. Like, she's not in a slick bun like all of us, you know? And so I think that it being in a Black space gives us gives us the space to be Black and to be happy in our Blackness, and to, you know, really rejoice and be in and feel comfortable. Like, nothing is weird. And so a lot of people, I think that a lot of white people need to realize that we're uncomfortable majority of our life in America. You know, we're really not okay with being here all the time, just because every single moment of our lives we're usually in a white space. And so I think what's beautiful about the Black Excellence Project, about CBCF, about creatives of color, is that we accept our Blackness, we love our Blackness, we rejoice in it, and make sure that other people feel comfortable, and we don't judge each other. You know, it's very much like a free flowing, fun atmosphere. A lot of people cheering each other on, and really just it's lovely because we have the space to talk about those difficult conversations. It's not abnormal. It's not like, you know, I had to, so for example, I'm the only Black girl on my dance company, and so I had to come into my dance company and tell them, hey, you know, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all of these deaths, all of these murders that the police, you know, have been doing to my people, that affects me, you know, and if I get pulled over, that could happen to me. And so I think a lot of people just felt that, you know, maybe I was angry, and obviously I was, but it's like, I want you to care about it too, because me caring about it and other Black people caring about it is not going to do the work. And so I think, I guess just the beautiful thing about being in a Black space is that we know what we need to talk about, and we know that we're always going to be there for each other regardless of what happens. And you know, I was at a march in a pandemic in August with a bunch of my cousins and friends from the CBCF, and you know, we're marching because, you know, marching with Black people and white people alike, and just really realizing that this affects real people. This isn't just something that you can really blow over. You know, I got to hear from George Floyd's family. You know, they came up on the stand and spoke. Just imagining how hard that is to lose. You know, he was a father, he was a son. You know, just to lose someone so close to you and have really not really, you know, substantial justice, and to see him pass away in on the media for everyone to see, and still for people to be like, oh, well, it's justified, you know? And so I think just being in a Black space gives you the chance to come together and not feel uncomfortable. It's really important for us to feel at home and okay and safe. I remember when I moved in on campus, and a friend of mine had the N word had been put on his dorm door, as well as a noose in West Quad. And so, obviously, being a Black person on campus, you're like, I've never, you know, people have been racist to me, of course, but threatening and threatening violence has never happened. And so I just think that being in a Black space really gives us a space to feel safe, and a space to talk and be there for each other. And that's what's great about it.
So, what do you do in that type of situation? Because we've talked about this in the past too. One of the challenges is, you know, I guess for a white person, you would basically reach out to DPSS or like call the cops, right? But these are traditionally entities that Black people don't really trust
Yeah.
because, uh, you know, of the stereotypes that these groups have towards who actually is the victim and who is the perpetrator, right? Um, so how do you deal with that situation? Like for all the people out there wondering like, this has happened to me before. I've been threatened, but I don't know who to go to feel safe.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Like in that situation, I remember, I think they reported it to the university, definitely. I think they were obviously reported it to the cops as well, but they didn't do anything. They didn't find who it was. There were no cameras in that hallway. So they just kind of were like, well, there's nothing we can really do. But obviously, if that were a white person and a white person was being threatened, they would have been on the hunt to figure out who it was, you know? And so it's just like a lack of care, you know, of Black people, really just a lack of caring about us at all. And that like really hurts. It's just like the law enforcement that we, you know, spend so much money on as Americans, and, you know, and really should be putting our trust into, they really don't have our trust at all. And they really don't care whether a Black person lives or dies. They could care less about us. And so I just think it's just stereotypes and biases that, you know, Black people really aren't worth saving. A lot of people just think that, you know, Black people are disposable. They really don't really have any worth, and that goes back to slavery as well. Just people thinking that Black people can be killed at any time, Black people can be raped, Black people can be taken advantage of and forced to do things. um, and so I just think that that kind of goes into the police and how they think. And so for me, I never call the police. Think one time I did, it was because I couldn't find my grandma. I was like 7. But I don't trust them at all. I remember being pulled over when I was in high school. I was in a very white neighborhood, and, you know, they were like, "Oh, you know, where'd you get this car? You know, you can't possibly own it. Who owns this car, and where'd you get it from?" And so that was like the first questions that I got asked when I got pulled over. And so I just think a lot of people just don't think Black people can have money, can succeed. And that's not just because like many of us haven't, but because the systems in place don't allow Black people to succeed. They don't allow Black people to move up in society. Not like, obviously I'm an exception, but there's a lot of exceptions. But there's a lot of Black people who live in communities where there's food deserts, where there's no career opportunities, where there's no proper education, where it's the school to prison pipeline. So if you are in school and you don't really have good teachers who invest in you, and you really don't have good books or things like that to really keep you educated and involved, then you turn to drugs, you turn to stealing, you turn to other ways of income to compensate for the fact that the government isn't helping you like they should be. And so I think a lot of that is just obviously systemic racism, plain and simple. A lot of people obviously don't want Black people or other people of color to succeed, and so they put Black people in communities where the possibility of succeeding is, you know, it's just non-existent. Like you can't succeed in a society where you can't get proper food, you can't get proper jobs, you can't possibly raise a family. And so people obviously have to turn to what they have to turn to, and that turns into jail or prison time, and then cycling that and making money off of prisoners and so many things. But it's really hard. I think that Black people don't ever want to call the police, honestly, in any situation. And so I think that's really hard because there's so many cops around campus now because of partying and because of COVID. People are trying to limit that. And so Black people aren't doing anything, you know, but white people down the street will be fine. They can party, you know, in their backyards and be fine. But if a Black person, I remember freshman year, I was 18, going to my first tailgate. It was a Black tailgate in Michigan State game, and police were riding down the street, you know, not even regarding people, Black people, riding down the street, right down the street from actually my house. And they were just going and not even stopping. You know, we were all obviously in the street, like having a good time. but there's white frats up the street who are still partying too, but they come to our house first because they think that we, are threatening and crazy, and we have to get shut down. So yeah, it's really hard. I don't think police should be anywhere near campus. I think DPSS should never have any weapons or anything on them. It should be a very calming environment for students, just because people of color are obviously afraid of the police, and as they should be.
Right. I want to acknowledge both point of views for a second because I 100% validate and acknowledge that Black people like yourself and others don't trust police because of your personal experiences with them and because of, you know, situations like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Like, I 100% um, validate the concerns there with police. I also wanted to just take a second to acknowledge that I think the job of police officers is really, really challenging. Like, of all the populations in the world, they see, besides like the military, they see some of the worst stuff in the world. And so they're already primed to see bad, but they aren't trained properly to deal with situations. And I'm not saying that, one group is more violent or more prone to needing police officers than another, but my point is that they're they're not trained properly to be able to deal with these situations. And there are things like targeting and stereotyping and things like that that occur because these are human characteristics of, one like person with a different look than another person seeing the other person as a threat. That's like primal.
Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge that I appreciate police because I think obviously like we want to have protection, but the way that it's currently being done in the training and the way that police are enforcing things is completely inappropriate to what their role should be. They should be more about creating peace and less about, inciting violence or um, yeah. And I also want to acknowledge too that I think it's really a very valid point of what you said of like police shouldn't be around schools. Like in Detroit public schools, like you have to go through metal detectors and like talk with a police officer before you enter the school. Like in some places, right? Um, and that's no environment for learning. Like if you're constantly worried about like this person with a gun or like, having to go through a metal detector because people don't trust me to enter my school, that's not creating a conducive environment to learning. And it makes it doubly challenging when you have like the buildings like filled with asbestos or lead and like rats, running around in the classrooms and like books falling apart. Like these are real challenges that young children deal with. And it sends a message you don't matter because your facilities are crumbling, your infrastructure is um, not not conducive to learning. And so I just wanted to make both points there because I think it's an important perspective to bring to the equation.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't personally think that we need police. I think we need counselors. I think we need people who can help people find jobs and to succeed, and, to have proper education. So, like, for example, like if you're a student in high school and both of your parents can barely make it, because of lack of job opportunities, then that person needs to come in and say, okay, there's a job opportunity 20 minutes away or 30 minutes away, and just figure out a way that they can get to that job. Obviously, people don't have the transportation like they should, but I think we need people that really care about people of color, people who care about our communities, and really just trying to uplift them and give Black people the same resources that white suburbs have. Because right now it's just like people, criminalizing and vilifying Black communities and really trying to break them apart and put people in jail and prison, and having that constant cycle over and over again, the same thing happening over and over again. So I think that like police shouldn't be, obviously their role should be very different. They shouldn't be carrying around guns. They shouldn't have the authority really to kill anybody, to me. I don't, it's just crazy to think about that. Police kill 3 people a day in America. That's like the statistic, which is just crazy. Like, why is that normal? Why has that become normal in our society? Gun use and having the authority to kill someone. Um, and so I just think that we need to reevaluate and just think about, what society do we really want? We obviously want equality and freedom and a good democracy and everything like that. But we also want people to realize that they have a right to live. They have a right to have a good job, have a good education, and really just live and not be feeling threatened. Like, Black people are always nervous in the car. I know that I'm nervous. My stepdad, he's Black. He's very nervous as well. And so I just think that it'd be nice to just be able to not be stressful as a person of color in this country for once, just to live and be happy where we are and not think about moving to another country or another state that's maybe less violent and things like that, but just feeling home here where we were born. We weren't supposed to be here, but we're here. So we need to make the most of it and also just try to change it for future generations.
Right. And along that point, we learn a lot in psychology, especially like um, positive psychology and like humanitarian, is when you're living in perpetual stress and feelings of not belonging. And then on top of that, it's challenging to get access to healthy food and education and things like that. This cycle of poverty and cycle of racism and not belonging contributes to massive repercussions in individuals' health. Like the health outcomes for perpetual stress are like almost worse than smoking cigarettes daily, like a pack a day.
Yeah.
Um, and so I always call for proactive solutions, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't remember exactly what the number is, but it's in the billions of, maybe actually more, but billions of dollars spent on um, reactionary healthcare. When if we just dedicated, a small amount of that budget towards proactive healthcare,
Yeah.
like our health outcomes would completely switch. But the system doesn't allow it because, like, all of for-profit hospitals, like big pharma, like all of these things, they want you to get sick because it's how they make money.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a sickening view of the world and something that I would call for change. I would also, going back to the police thing real quick, I would call for a demilitarization of the police and a re-education of the police, because my personal viewpoint is I don't think we don't need them. I think having some sort of protector is important, but I view it from a lens of protection, not from a lens of like infiltrating and like terminating, right? That's like military. I think personally, the demilitarization is about, yes, like police officers shouldn't have weapons. Maybe they still have things like armor, like because maybe there are violent situations that protect their lives. Okay, defense, I'm all about that. Um, and I'm also about re-education. Like, why aren't police officers trained psychologists, trained sociologists? Like, why are they not being trained in these like very human situations of being able to de-escalate rather than escalate? Um, so those are the 2 points that I wanted to make there.
Yeah, I also think that like the police, if they are going to exist and they are going to be demilitarized, they need to represent America. They need to represent people of color. So if you're in a Black community, you can't have white police officers coming in from the suburbs. You need to have Black people from that community who are the police, not these people that are coming in who've never experienced, who've never been with Black people before, who are coming in from very segregated places, who've never experienced or even had a conversation with the Black person. That just won't work. You know, they'll automatically believe what they hear on the in the media and think that, okay, Black people are violent, you know, they're inherently violent, they use drugs, they steal, they do all these things because of what the media tells them. But I think that not only just the police institution, but all of our institutions need to reflect actually America and not just be predominantly white men.
I wanted to propose a question, and that is, can we still have the America that we know in terms of like home of the uh, in terms of like America, uh, like freedom and bravery and things like that, and like change the narrative of what capitalism means, because capitalism mainly is, it is about opportunity, but it's also about profit maximization. And so I've been very curious about whether capitalism can still exist, but in a new era of, it's not about maximizing profits, but it's more about doing the most good. And that's something I'm very curious about. Something I don't know the, I guess, hardcore like economic details of, or like social details of. But what do you think about that?
Well, I definitely think that it's hard to be like a good capitalist country. So like, for example, I in my class the other week, my professor told me that in the Ronald Reagan era, there were I think 10 prisons built a month, and then per prison were 3 Walmarts built. And so that correlated exactly. And so I think that obviously a lot of the motivation for those prisons were to make things for Walmart, obviously. And so I think that a lot of people just think in terms of profit. You know, racism has turned into racialized capitalism. You know, if we put 40% of the prison population right now is Black, and I think we are probably 12% of the country, smaller than that maybe, but just not representative of actual Black people in general. And so I think that the statistic is also 1 in 3 Black men will go to jail or prison in their lifetime, which is a crazy statistic compared to 1 in 17 white men. And so I think that a lot of our capitalism right now is just racialized. Like, obviously, we exploit people in other countries, you know, in other countries like Bangladesh, and pay them hardly anything. And then we, you know, will charge $100 for a pair of jeans or $70 for 1 pair of jeans just to make money that way and exploit as many people as possible. So I think it's really hard to change that. I think it's really hard to kind of reverse capitalism in that way. And so I think the key for trying to, I guess, combat that is really investing in our own communities and investing. So, like, for example, if you want to go get Mexican food, don't go to, you know, Taco Bell chain, or don't go to a corporation chain. Go to a place that's locally owned by someone in your community. Go to a Black owned place, go to another person of color owned place, go to, I don't know, a white owned place, whatever you feel like doing. But don't give money to the corporations that are capitalizing off of other people in other countries and people here. A lot of people don't realize that we have modern day slavery going on in our prison system. Over 3 million people are in prison right now. And I think prisoners make like 12 cents an hour. That's when I last looked it up, which is very, very small. And obviously, they have to use that money for buying soap, buying toothpaste, buying phone calls to call their families, which are very upcharged and very expensive. And so when they make, when they make the little bit of money that they do have, they spend it directly back into the prison system. So I just think capitalism is horrible. It's turned into racialized capitalism as we know. And honestly, the way to really get rid of that is to invest in our own communities and really start valuing our own companies instead of big corporations that are exploiting people.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to, let's see, I wanted to shift maybe a little bit to the election.
Hmm.
Um, I recognize the time right now, so I want to make sure we cover everything we want to talk about. What changes does the next administration, whatever party, right, need to make to propel this momentum of racial equality and justice and police reform, education reform, healthcare reform, like all of these things? Like, what is most important for this next administration to do in the upcoming 4 years?
I think the most important thing that they need to do is invest in people of color in their communities. That means giving them the proper, that means building more schools, maybe giving them more resources in terms of money funding for books, for teachers, giving students the opportunities to have job opportunities, internships in their communities. Um, Also, like you said before, demilitarizing the police, really teaching them, really teaching them racial bias and the role that that has in people's thought processes about Black people and other people of color. I also think that they need to stop building more prisons. That just needs to stop. We have enough. We are leading. It's crazy. We're leading the world in prisoners. We have 25% of the world's prisoners right now, which is just a crazy thing that we just have so many people incarcerated. And we think that the key to rehabilitation is putting people in a box for 50, 60 years or life. And we think that that's the key to rehabilitating people, but it's not. Obviously, how, like, I think also what needs to be abolished, which I think that a lot of people don't know a lot about, is solitary confinement. um, who deserves to be sitting in a black room with no light, and the only human contact that you have is a guard coming to your door with food for years? How is that rehabilitating anyone? What type of effect does that have on your mental health? You know, right now, a lot of people having mental health issues right now just because of not having contact with family, not having being able to see friends like they usually should. But imagining being in prison for years. I watched a documentary, which I all recommend you guys should watch. It's called 13th by Ava DuVernay. Also, read Angela Davis if you can, read Michelle Alexander, and just realize that, our country right now is just based on capitalism, and we need to just get away from that. We need to realize that we need to look out for people. That's what we need. We need a president, we need people in power that are looking out for all people, regardless of their race, their socioeconomic status, their sexuality, all of that. We need to look out for everyone, and we need to really get away from being capitalist and trying to make much money as possible, and also trying to become not colorblind. That's not what the goal is, but just becoming realizing that Black people and people of color have it harder than white people, and we need to help them become on the same level as white people in order to help them. So I think that Trump's not going to do that. I'm going to say that right now. I think Biden and Harris will obviously advocate more for people of color than Trump will. And so if they win, then we have a better shot at achieving a more racial equality and less prisons, and more education funding, more job opportunity funding, and giving people of color what they deserve. So those to me are the most important things. And then I'll mention like climate change too. I think that's a big thing we need to realize too, not only just like our individual efforts, but also the corporations that are causing the pollution in the first place. You know, a lot of people think that it's just us kind of doing the damage, but no, it's the corporations too that are doing majority of the damage. Not only that, but also the fact that most Black people live in communities where the pollution is higher, and that's on purpose. So also giving, I think, giving Black people a chance to live in other communities, to live away from power plants and meat industry plants, and giving them a chance to live in clean suburbs like white people do would be,
Landfills.
yeah,
That's
exactly. And so,
another one.
yeah, and so I think just making sure that, you know, people have the same opportunities. That's really the key. Giving people the same opportunities for jobs, education, not putting people near power plants and landfills, like you said, and really just valuing human life. You know,
Mhm.
if the life expectancy in one town is in the 40s just because of pollution, and you're at the white suburb 20 minutes away and their life expectancy is in the 70s and 80s, then you clearly have a problem, and you need to reevaluate why, you know, you need to realize why Black people were put there in the first place. Obviously because they want Black people to die and die sooner, and for white people to obviously live longer, but you can't have a democracy that values people like that.
Right. Yeah, and we didn't even talk about redlining and the actual um, like physical separation of individuals in communities.
Yeah.
I just learned a little bit more about redlining literally yesterday, and how much of an issue it is in like gerrymandering and like these things. It's it's really quite disgusting, and it's so many people are blind to these very real realities, which is why I always advocate for people to have dialogue. I
Yeah.
hope I would hope that this podcast is one of those spaces where we can sort of start to create that ripple of people coming together to have authentic dialogue about real global challenges, real individual challenges, and hopefully that starts more conversations that lead to action. Because as
Mhm.
much as this is a conversation, I personally go off and start taking action on what I believe and what I take away. Um, and I would hope that other people begin to do the same. I wanted to use this as an opportunity before maybe we talk a little bit about more a lighter subject, unless there's anything else you wanted to add here, but maybe an opportunity for us to co-create some demands that we have of um, whoever is elected, whichever administration is elected today. So maybe we could co-create some demands together.
Yeah. So I can give a few, I guess. My first demand would be demilitarizing the police. The second one would be investing in communities, not only just money, but actually investing in students succeeding. You know, giving them the proper, maybe money for buying books they don't have, giving teachers a chance to maybe further their education that they haven't been able to do like other teachers have. Um, and then in terms of housing and things like that, is like giving people of color a space to have affordable housing. So if they make minimum wage, they can still afford to live in an apartment and have a child. You know, making sure that they have those. You know, whether that's getting welfare combined with working, but giving them a chance to live a normal life and be able to not have to depend on welfare of the government possibly, but just making enough on minimum wage, and also maybe even like their job, giving them a chance to do school at the same time. But I think like investing not only in people of color communities, but like other communities as well, just really helping them succeed and educating people, giving them the resources to move up in society and to not have to struggle for money all the time.
And I'm not going to say the same ones in light of creating new demands. Um, so I would also say, on top of what you said, I would add re-educate the police.
Hmm.
I would add raise the minimum wage to a living wage.
Hmm.
Um, a single parent shouldn't have to work two jobs or three jobs or four jobs to support, their three-person family.
Hmm.
Um, it's terrible. And the parents, that's one of the major issues too, is that if the parents aren't around to help incentivize the engagement in classes and to help like educate themselves and those things, like kids can get into trouble. And so I think families need a lot more support. um, Also healthcare, like I demand healthcare reform, because right now the approach is a reactionary approach, based on profits, not based on health and wellness. And we need a proactive approach to healthcare.
Hmm.
um, my family has been impacted by this as well. My father lives in a senior living home that is ridiculously expensive. And um, our medical benefits that we have with our current insurance, luckily we have insurance in the first place, many families don't, but our insurance is really bad. um, like, we have to pay so much money out of pocket for like even the smallest things. Like, for example, last year I had hurt my shoulder, um, training for frisbee and like weightlifting and stuff, and I still have this issue a year later. And the reason why I haven't gone and done something more about it is because the copay that I had for actually going to see like an orthopedic doctor was so much, and like it took up like a paycheck plus for me. And like I can't personally afford to go out and pay with the money that I make from, my jobs, to go and like get an MRI and things like that. And so like I've been doing my own exercises and things, but still a year later I still have this issue, and I can't sleep on my right side because of this issue. I have to sleep on one side, and I know if I turned in the middle of the night, because my arm is like almost paralyzed. So it's like, and that's me. Like, I'm a white male, right? From a middle class family. I can't imagine what people in more dire circumstances than I have to deal with. Um, so that's near to my heart. And then obviously education reform. Don't even get me started. This is what Maximize is all about. Um, and then obviously climate change, I think, is just a big one. I demand for individuals to start taking more account, being more accountable to themselves for how much waste they have.
Yeah.
Um, and I demand uh, that we start phasing out big corporations, start breaking them up, and start putting an emphasis on sustainable packaging, sustainable, transportation, things like that. Start shifting to like net zero or negative carbon footprints. I think honestly, the runaway has already started, and we're going to start experiencing a lot more challenges. I think COVID-19 was just the start of all the challenges that we're going to experience in our lifetime. And if we don't start acting yesterday, things are only going to get worse. So I'm trying to be optimistic, but also acknowledging that there are many challenges yet to come.
Yeah. I also think like it'd be good for the food cost to lower, just because like a lot of people who are obviously don't have a lot of money, they can't afford to eat plant-based. They can't afford to maybe shop at Whole Foods and other health food stores like that. So I think what would be great is if we all started shopping locally and really getting fruits and vegetables from our communities that are cheaper, and really, and especially if people can't afford them, then really like the homeless shelters and other places like that should be giving them to other people who can't afford, to shop at the most, the best health food store ever. So I think just really valuing what our own community has to offer, what farmers have to offer, and not really investing in the big corporations and what they are giving out would be good. Or climate change.
Yeah, and even just in Ann Arbor, like the local farmers market, like you can't access that through all times of the year, obviously, but when it's there, like it's amazing. Even just the social experience with even with a mask, just going out there and like meeting these people who put so many hours into growing food, like fresh food and vegetables and making their own products of things that they have created is it's such a beautiful experience to take part in that. And like if you actually pay attention, right, and be mindful when you're eating and when you're cooking and eating this food, you notice changes in you. Like you notice and you can tell when someone's put love into something. And you have to, the goal is to be able to resonate with that frequency of love that people have put in. And it's cheaper too, buying local,
Yeah.
than all this transportation from things like importing like vegetables and fruits in particular from like other states or from like other countries even. um, and I mean, for me personally, I imagine a future of smaller cities that are fully integrated with the environment, where there are living ecosystems on buildings and solar panels accounting for most of the energy, and people growing their own fruits, vegetables at home. Like, if you want to raise chickens and, like, eat meat, power to you, like, great, raise the food yourself, have the eggs, make it be a sustainable thing. um, the pandemic really worried my family, and we actually started gardening for the first time in like 4 years because we wanted to have fresh vegetables. And like toilet paper was going out the window, like people were raiding stores, and like grocery stores were empty. And we were like, damn, like, is this the point where we have to like grow our own food? Like, should we get some chickens right now? Like, it got to that point, we were wondering. And I think regardless of if grocery stores are, supplied or not, we should be making the shift anyway.
Yeah.
The challenge is people who, have to work 3 jobs and still send their kids to school and all of these things. They don't have the time to grow their own foods and vegetables and things. So I think we need some really major changes, particularly cultural changes, but also systemic changes, um, to help create a more uh, sustainable way of living, a more oneness way of living, and like a deeper connection not only with each other but the earth itself.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like a lot of people are obviously taught that meat and dairy and all these things that the media has said is healthy, that is the best thing to eat. And so, I've been fortunate in my life to have been taught to eat vegetables and really eat healthy and not really value dairy products that much and really not emphasize meat that much in my diet either. So I've been fortunate enough to just really have been taught like the right way of eating, the right way of living, how to live a long, healthy life, and to really just value what I put in my body because we really are, what we eat, as they say, we really are, and it really reflects on our health. If you don't eat healthy and you don't value what you're putting in your body and you don't value what you're doing in your life, then that's going to take a toll on your health one day.
Right. Yeah, and we could talk more about like the fact that chickens are in many like massive farms are like crowded and they don't have space to move and all of these things, and it's like a prison for chickens. Like, the chickens are being imprisoned literally in coops and like in these things. And um personally, I don't eat meat. I think you're pescatarian too, or no? Yeah, so
Yes.
we're both pescatarian. It's cheaper. It's a cheaper way to eat. But also, if you actually knew where your food came from and you had to deal with it yourself, if you had to kill it yourself, and if you had to like skin it and defeather it and do all these things, you probably wouldn't want to eat it. I mean, some people definitely would. I would say a lot of people would. But if you had to do it yourself, like I've heard many people I've spoken to say things like, uh, like I like them when they're cows, and then I don't really like them until they're on my plate. And it's like you don't know that whole process of like what happens to that cow before it becomes steak on your plate.
Yeah.
And it's just a lack of empathy, a lack of knowledge, awareness. Um, okay, with maybe a couple more minutes, I want to just give you an opportunity to share more about, you know, a lighter topic of health and wellness. We've already started talking about it, but um, given all of these stressors and all of this crazy stuff going on in our world today, what are some measures that we can all take as individuals to be healthier, be more well, and be happier?
I think what's key for me to been this year, I used to really not take care of myself in terms of sleeping, but really getting like the proper 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, waking up early, feeling good, eating. So, for example, I eat granola and fruit for breakfast with peanut butter, which is really good. And like for lunch, I'll maybe make like some rice, beans, and salmon burgers or something like that, or maybe even just like a vegetable stir fry, which I really love making. But I think the key is just to value what you put in your body, because obviously, like, the key to being healthy is not only just valuing what you do in your day to day life, but also what you put in your body. So, buying vegetables, buying organic is really good. Doing yoga every day. I haven't been doing it every day, but been trying to do it as much as I can. Really just exercise in any way that you can. So whether even if there's a pandemic, I know, and it's cold outside, maybe that's doing some yoga downstairs, just in your living room. Maybe that's doing that in your room. Maybe that means having a little dance party while you're cooking. I think just making life happier than it is right now. You don't have to be doing the most, and if you have a little meat in your diet, that's okay. It's not the end of the world, because I used to eat meat too. I used to eat chicken and turkey primarily. But I think just realizing that meat isn't necessary. When you become plant based or you become pescatarian, you realize how much that vegetables are delicious. And that all you have to do is season them a little bit, and they'll taste, darn good to me. And I just think that it's a great thing that, we are eating foods that are meant for us. We're not meant to eat meat. We're not meant to have dairy milk. We're not meant to have those things. Society has programmed us into believing that that's what's right for us. But in order to live a long, healthy life, we need to not have stress. We need to stretch our bodies. We need to exercise, and really just meditate and deep breathe. We need to eat well, and that means having a balanced diet. So if you're going to have meat maybe one day, then you're going to have vegetables the next, and that'll be your diet. But just making sure that we keep, our weight in check, we keep our stress in check, we make sure that we're not overwhelming ourselves too much to the point where we can't handle what we're doing. And so really just giving yourself a balance and making sure that nothing in your life is too much in access. So whether that's not taking on too many eboard positions that you can't handle, whether that's not working too much during the week. So if you know that 15 hours a week is your max while you're a student, then do that. If you want to do yoga every day, you want to stretch every day, then making that hour, making sure that you have that free time to do so. I think also just making sure that you're valuing, your body. So I know a lot of us are college students and we like drinking, we like partying, we like doing all those things, but making sure that we're taking the appropriate measures for our health and for our bodies to make sure that we stay well, because a lot of people think that because we're young, we're invincible, but that's not the case. There are people that are our age who have passed away from COVID. So, really, just making sure that we are keeping our immune systems up, and we are really taking care of ourselves and really valuing our bodies, because, we're not invincible. We never were meant to be. And so we need to really think about what we eat. Don't eat fast food often. If you do once a week, it's not the end of the world, but maybe making that shift in your diet for the next day and making sure that you're having vegetables and things that are good for your health. Um, and yeah, those are some of my keys.
I think those are really amazing keys. Do you mind if I jump in and share a few of mine?
Yes.
So, a couple of things. I learned a really fun technique that everyone could do. Very simple. Writing on a note card or a sticky note, three things that you're gonna do in your day before you do anything else, and make that routine. So you could do something like mind, body, spirit. You could do something like meditate. Um, well, let's see, something for the mind. Um, like reading like 10 pages of book. Body, maybe like stretching, or maybe doing a little bit of like at home cardio. Like if you have literally, you don't even have to have a room. Like you can do this anywhere, literally, like doing some high knees, or like maybe even going for a walk. Like if you're a little less able bodied, or if you're not able bodied at all, and you're like more bedridden or something, even doing things like leg lifts, or like stretching your arms, like doing anything to move your body in different ways. And then spirit, doing something like meditating or like writing down what you're grateful for. Doing these three things every single day before you do anything else in your day, and making that routine. Um, Other things, always try and have vegetables a part of every single meal you have. It doesn't matter if you're eating fast food or whatever, as long as you're eating vegetables, like fresh vegetables, preferably, that's gonna get you at least somewhere. Personally, I don't eat fast food. The only fast food that I will eat is like, I don't know, like, and I wouldn't even do this now because I'm pescatarian, but like In and Out when I was living in California, that's awesome. Um, but I banned myself from eating Taco Bell. I banned myself from eating McDonald's. It's just not worth it. Like it's calories, but you can find almost as cheap options that are actually going to be good for you instead of hurting you. Um, Also, cook doing more cooking, like learning how to cook, learning how spices interact with each other and how these spices like interact like with your immune system or your heart or things like that. And doing natural things, drinking as much water as possible. People need a gallon of water a day, but it's almost unrealistic to do. But always having water, preferably in like a reusable bottle instead of plastic. um, And then this point about like drinking and drugs and partying and stuff, it's so whack. It's so whack. Um, like I get it, people need to be social, but there are healthier ways to be social. And I'm coming up now
Yeah.
on I've actually surpassed a year of sobriety from alcohol. I'm very proud of that. I started last October with Sober October, and I've gone a full year and now into November. I'm really proud of myself for that. I've cut out other drugs as well. I started in January cutting out other things. And so now I'm coming up on a year of sobriety for that. And I've saved so much money. I feel better, clarity. I feel better physically. And I still have just as much fun with my friends. Honestly, I can still go and like, dance and do these things. It might take a little longer for me to loosen up, but you can still do these things and not have to waste money and sacrifice your health.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because a lot of people, especially in college, just think that the key to have fun is like you have to have a drink. And I never drank like in high school. I wasn't that person. I was very innocent and kind of reserved, but I still would go to parties and dance, but I was the one who wouldn't drink. I would just have a good time and I'm a dancer, so I just would have fun and have fun with my friends and you know do what I love. So I think that big misconception is like you're not more fun when you're drunk. You're not different. When you're drunk inherently, but you need to just realize that if you want to have fun, you don't need those things. You don't need drugs. You don't need drinks. You can just be yourself and have fun and dance and then go to sleep after and not be hungover the next day. Just be like feel good and feel good just going to sleep. and just feeling good that you didn't put anything that's harmful in your body that's going to make you regret it the next day.
And get good wholesome sleep too, like checking the phone right before bed first thing in the morning. It's one of the worst habits that I'm trying to overcome, is not checking my phone first thing, or right before bed and first thing in the morning. Doing those three things before you do anything else is key. um, I wanted to make one last plug, and then I'll leave it to you for final thoughts. One of the most beneficial things that people can do now, especially with social distancing and quarantining and isolation and all of these things, is to find some type of community to be a part of. Maybe you have a friend, or maybe a group of friends that you regularly interact with. Maybe you talk to your family, and that's a good community for you. I really recommend people trying to find a way to be face to face, whether it be, socially distanced with masks in person, or whether it be even virtual. Um, it's, I think, really important to have that interaction face to face with people, and being able to actually see people's face, right? Which is why virtual is a good recommendation here. Um, for those listening who have made it to the end here, we run a weekly segment on Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern time called Real Talk. And Real Talk is essentially a safe dialogue space for members of Maximize, which we call allies, and guests and family members to come and discuss real global issues to create real solutions. And last week we spoke about inclusive language. We had a safe space of discussion. This coming week, tomorrow actually, we're talking about um, justice and peace, and we have a really amazing speaker from intergroup relations at Michigan, Cesar Vargas, coming for that. So we'll include a way for you to get involved if you're curious of joining and you're listening. Tiffany comes regularly to these, and maybe you can attest to the community that we've created and the family that we've started to build with Maximize.
Yeah. So basically, we're all different, like student org leaders. We're all doing different things on campus. We all didn't know each other before, but it's just an open space for us to just talk about different topics about our experiences, or maybe how we think about it, or maybe how we've learned about certain things. And we can just have like an open discussion for an hour. So it's nice to just talk to people that I never would have talked to if I hadn't been in Maximize in the first place.
Awesome. Thank you. So I want to hand it over to you to final thoughts. Really anything that you'd like to share, anything you'd like to plug, or anything else that you might want to discuss.
Yeah. So I guess just final thoughts for me would just be, take care of yourselves, whether that's spiritually, physically, exercising, eating good, valuing who you're around, who you I guess where your energy lies. So if you're having a bad relationship with someone, maybe that person isn't for you in your life. Really just valuing people who value you and your thoughts and your lives, your views about things, and really just putting ourselves in those friendships and in those relationships where you feel comfortable and okay. I think having a uh, diverse people in your life and just having a bunch of friends is great, but also just realizing, what does true friendship mean? What is good energy? What are good vibrations? What are good people I should have in my life? In terms of, I guess, criminal justice and equality and freedom and things that we've been talking about, making sure that you're advocating for people that not only look like you but also who look differently than you, and making sure that you're using your voice for change, whether that's, you don't have to be protesting in DC like I did, but you can talk to people who look differently than you, maybe join. So I had a friend of mine who reached out about a month ago. She's white, and she said, Tiffany, what can I do? Can I maybe join one of your Black orgs and just sit in on your Zoom calls? And I was like, yeah, do you want to come in and you want to talk about how you feel, and also hear from Black people who are speaking about their experiences within law and within the criminal justice system, then sure. And so I think that it's just be vulnerable, accept that we're all human and that we all are just living, we're all just human beings who don't really know the answer to a lot of things. And so just be your best selves. Don't be perfect, but be who is authentically you, not what your mom wants you to do, not what your dad wants you to do, not what your best friend wants you to do, but be you, be true to yourself, and really invest in yourself, because we only have one life here. We want to do as much as we can. Really take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually. Meditate, do yoga, dance around the room if you want, and really take care of yourself during this time. And also, especially during election season, when this is election day and it's very hectic and crazy and a lot of people are voting today, really be prepared to relax the rest of this week and take care of yourself in any way that you can.
That's really amazing. Thank you for your final thoughts, Tiffany. And thank you for joining Maximize Podcast. This has been a very humbling experience for me. It's always an honor and a privilege speaking with you, spending time with you. And I really look forward to the next time we're able to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you all enjoyed it. I don't know if you want me to put like my contact info, but if you want to follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is tiff in.h. And my Instagram for the Black Excellence Project is the Black Excellence Project. So that's easy. And so, yeah, I'd love for you to follow me and also connect with me if you have any questions. And if you just want to talk to me, feel free.
Awesome. And we'll add all of that information below as well. So thank you, Tiffany. It's been an honor and a privilege, and best of luck. Have a great rest of your day today.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Maximize Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up to like this video and comment your thoughts below. If you'd like to see more episodes just like this, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to be notified immediately when new episodes are released. We'd love for you to become an ally. To become an ally, click the join link and answer our simple 2-question survey. To learn more about the perks of becoming an ally, visit our website at maximizemi.org. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, submit the podcast request form, also linked in the description below. We'll see you in the next episode.